In late 2017, a couple named Aaron and Melissa moved into a small apartment complex on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio, after Aaron accepted a new job with a construction firm that had recently expanded its operations in the area. The apartment itself wasn't particularly remarkable. It was part of a three-story brick building that had probably been built sometimes in the 1960s, with narrow hallways, slightly outdated fixture, and the kind of quiet residential atmosphere that many older apartment complexes have, where most of the tenants keep to themselves. Aaron and Melissa had been married for 4 years at that point, and like many couples starting over in a new city, they were mostly focused on settling into a routine. Aaron's job required him to leave early mornings, usually around 6, while Melissa worked remotely as a graphic designer and spent most of her time in the apartment during the day. For the first week or so, everything felt normal. They unpacked boxes, bought groceries from a nearby supermarket, and slowly arranged the furniture so the apartment started feeling like home rather than a temporary place. The first unusual thing Melissa experienced was subtle enough that she didn't mention it to Aaron right away. One afternoon, while she was working on her laptop in the living room, she had the strange feeling that someone was standing in the hallway outside the bedroom. It wasn't something she saw clearly at first, just a dark shape that seemed to move slightly at the edge of her vision. When she turned her head fully towards the hallway, there was nothing there. She assumed it was just her imagination. But over the next few days, the same thing happened again several times. Always in roughly the same place near the hallway that connected the bedroom, bathroom, and living room. Sometimes it appeared like a faint shadow against the wall, and other times it was more like the brief impression of someone standing just out of sight. Melissa eventually mentioned it to Aaron one evening, but he laughed it off in a gentle way people do when they assume their partner is simply feeling uneasy in a new environment. New place, different lighting, probably just shadows from the streetlights outside. Melissa nodded, because at the time, the explanation seemed reasonable enough. The nightmares began about 2 weeks after they moved in. At first, they were kind of vague, unsettling dreams people occasionally have after stressful days, but within a few nights they became far more vivid. Melissa started dreaming about the apartment itself, except in the dreams the place always looked slightly darker and emptier than it did in reality. In those dreams she often found herself standing in the hallway outside the bedroom, staring towards the living room while feeling the overwhelming sense that someone else was inside the apartment with her. One night she woke up suddenly around 3 in the morning after hearing what sounded like whispering near the foot of the bed. She opened her eyes and sat up halfway, listening carefully. Aaron was asleep beside her, breathing steadily, and the room was completely dark except for a faint line of light coming from the street lamp outside. For a few seconds she heard nothing. Then the whispering started again. It was extremely faint, almost like someone speaking through a wall, but it was close enough that she could tell it was inside the bedroom. Melissa reached over and nudged Aaron's shoulder. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Aaron stirred slightly but didn't wake up fully. The whispering stopped. She lay awake for another 10 minutes before finally convincing herself that it must have been part of the dream she had just been having. But the experience didn't stop there. Over the next weeks, Melissa began waking up multiple times during the night with the same strange feeling that someone was standing somewhere inside the apartment watching her. Aaron meanwhile slept through most of those nights without noticing anything unusual. Then one night, something happened that Melissa never forgot. It was shortly after 2 in the morning when she woke up suddenly from another nightmare. But this time, something felt immediately wrong. She was laying on her back staring at the ceiling fully awake, but she couldn't move. At first she thought her body was just stiff from sleep, but when she tried to lift her arm or turn her head, she realized that she was completely unable to move any part of her body at all. The room was silent. Then she noticed something standing next to the bed. At first, it looked like a shadow, but as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she began to see it more clearly. It was the shape of a woman. The figure was standing only a few feet away, facing directly towards her side of the bed. What made the sight horrifying was the woman's appearance. The skin looked burned and uneven, as if it had been badly scarred or damaged. Portions of her face appeared dark and distorted, and her hair hung down in thin, tangled strands that partially covered her eyes. The woman wasn't moving, she was just standing there watching her. Melissa tried to scream, but no sound came out. For what felt like nearly 2 minutes, she remained completely paralyzed, staring at the figure beside the bed, while the woman continued to watch her without blinking. Then everything suddenly went black. When Melissa woke up again in the morning, Aaron was already getting ready for work. She didn't tell him about what has happened last night. At first, she wasn't even sure if it had been real. But over the next several days, Aaron began noticing that Melissa was behaving differently. She seemed restless and distracted, often whispering quietly to herself when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Her eating habits changed suddenly as well. Some days she would eat very little at all, while on other days she seemed strangely hungry and would eat large amounts of food late at night. Aaron also began noticing something else. Several mornings he woke up around 2 or 3 and found that Melissa was no longer in her bed. The first time it happened, he walked into the living room and found her standing near the sliding glass door that led to the small backyard behind the building. She was just standing there in the darkness, staring outside. "What are you doing?" he asked. Melissa turned slowly towards him, looking confused. "I couldn't sleep," she said. But Aaron noticed something strange in her expression. It looked distant, almost unfamiliar. Over the following weeks, her behavior became more unpredictable. Sometimes she seemed perfectly normal, joking with Aaron and talking about everyday things, but other times, she would just sit silently in the living room for long periods of time, staring towards the hallway with an expression that made Aaron deeply uncomfortable. Then one night, something happened that convinced him the situation was far more serious than he had originally believed. Aaron woke up suddenly in the middle of the night with the overwhelming sensation that something heavy was pressing down on his chest. At first he thought he was still dreaming. Then he opened his eyes. Melissa was sitting on top of him. Her knees were pressed against his arms, pinning him down against the mattress. But the look on her face didn't resemble the woman he had married. Her expression was twisted with anger, her eyes wide and unfocused, and her mouth slightly open as a low growling sound came from deep in her throat. "I will take her with me," she said in a harsh voice that sounded nothing like her own. Aaron tried to push her away, but her grip on his throat suddenly tightened. For several seconds, he struggled to breathe while Melissa continued repeating the same sentence over and over in that strange, distorted voice. "I will take her with me." Aaron fought with everything he had. Finally, he managed to twist his body sideways and shove her off the bed. Melissa collapsed onto the floor and instantly lost consciousness. Aaron sat on the edge of the bed, coughing and gasping for air, staring down at his wife while trying to understand what had just happened. The next morning, Melissa remembered none of it. She listened in complete shock as Aaron explained the events of the night, insisting that she had never left the bed at all. Concerned and frightened, Aaron scheduled several medical appointments over the following weeks. They visited doctors, neurologists, and even psychiatrists. But every test came back normal, and Melissa behaved completely normal in front of every doctor they saw. Then one night, Aaron had a dream that changed everything. In the dream, he was standing in the living room of the apartment when we heard footsteps coming from the basement stairway. A woman slowly walked towards him. Her skin was burnt and scarred. Her eyes were dark and hollow. When she reached the center of the living room, she stopped and looked directly at him. "I will take her," she said calmly. "And if you don't leave, I will kill you." Aaron woke up shaking. Over the next few days, Melissa's condition deteriorated even further. She complained constantly about headaches and exhaustion, barely eating at all, and sometimes spent hours sitting silently while staring towards the hallway as if she was watching someone standing there. Finally, one evening, Aaron returned home from work and made a decision. Without explaining much, he began packing their belongings. Within 2 hours, they had loaded everything they could into the car and left the apartment. But as Aaron would explain later, the terrifying part of the story was this: leaving the apartment did not end the experiences. It only marked the beginning of something much worse. And what followed in the weeks after they moved out convinced Aaron that whatever had entered their lives inside the apartment never actually stayed behind. When Aaron and Melissa finally left the apartment that evening, Aaron felt an overwhelming sense of relief as soon as they drove away from the building. The entire situation had escalated so quickly over the previous weeks that packing their things and leaving almost felt like escaping something rather than simply moving out of a rental property. He told himself that whatever had been happening inside that apartment had probably been connected to stress, poor sleep, or some strange environmental factors in the building that had been affecting Melissa's health. For the first 2 days after they moved into a temporary hotel on the other side of the city, things seemed calmer. Melissa slept for long stretches without waking in the middle of the night, and although she still appeared tired and withdrawn, she behaved mostly like herself again. Aaron started to believe that leaving the apartment had now solved the problem. But on the third night, he woke up around 2 in the morning once again and noticed that Melissa was sitting upright in the chair near the window of the hotel room. She was facing the glass, staring outside into the empty parking lot below. At first, Aaron assumed she simply couldn't sleep. He sat up slightly and said her name quietly. She didn't respond. He repeated it again. This time she turned her head slowly towards him. Even in the dim light coming from the street lamp outside, Aaron could see that something about her expression looked wrong. Her face was pale and strangely tense, and her eyes seemed unfocused, as if she were looking through him rather than directly at him. "Melissa," he said again. She blinked once and seemed to return to herself. "Oh, sorry," she said softly. "I think I was half asleep." Aaron didn't argue. He simply told her to come back to the bed. The next morning, she didn't remember getting out of the bed at all. Over the following weeks, they moved into another apartment across the town, a new building that Aaron had found through a co-worker who knew the property manager. The place was clean, bright, and far removed from the older complex where everything had started. Aaron hoped the change would finally bring things back to normal, but the strange behavior returned almost immediately. Melissa began complaining about severe headaches that appeared suddenly and lasted for hours. Sometimes she would sit quietly in the living room holding her temples while staring at the floor as if trying to concentrate on something that Aaron couldn't hear. Her appetite also changed again, but this time in the opposite direction. She barely ate at all, often skipping meals entirely and claiming she simply didn't feel hungry. One evening, Aaron returned from work and found her sitting in the exact same position on the couch where he had left her that morning. "Melissa?" he said cautiously. She didn't respond right away. For a moment, Aaron wondered if she had fallen asleep sitting up, but then he noticed her lips moving slightly. She was whispering something under her breath. Aaron walked closer. "What are you saying?" Melissa suddenly stopped whispering and looked at him with a confused expression. "You were talking to someone," Aaron said. "No, I wasn't," but Aaron had clearly seen her lips moving. That night, he slept lightly, waking up several times to check whether Melissa was still beside him in the bed. Around 3 in the morning, he woke up again, but this time the room felt strangely cold. Melissa wasn't next to him. Aaron sat up quickly and looked around the bedroom. The door leading to the hallway was open. He got out of bed and walked slowly towards the living room. At first, he didn't see her. Then he noticed the balcony door was still open, letting cold air drift into the apartment. Melissa was standing outside barefoot, He was leaning against the railing and staring down into the dark courtyard below. Aaron stepped onto the balcony. "Melissa, what are you doing out here?" She turned towards him slowly. Her expression looked distant again. "I heard someone calling," she said quietly. Aaron felt a chill running down his spine. "It was a woman's voice," she said. Aaron guided her back inside and locked the balcony door. From that night onwards, he started noticing something else. Melissa sometimes reacted to things that weren't there. Once, while they were eating dinner, she suddenly turned her head sharply towards the hallway, as if someone had just walked past the doorway. Another time, she just froze in the kitchen and stared towards the ceiling for several seconds before whispering something Aaron couldn't understand. The situation grew worse over the next 2 weeks. Melissa's health deteriorated. She looked thinner, exhausted, and frequently complained about feeling weak or dizzy. Aaron scheduled more medical appointments, but once again, every test came back normal. The doctors couldn't find no explanation for her symptoms. Then something happened that convinced Aaron the presence they had encountered in the old apartment had never truly left. Late one evening, he was sitting in the living room watching television, while Melissa slept in the bedroom. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered. Aaron looked up, assuming it was just a loose bulb. Then he saw something that made his stomach tighten. For just a fraction of a second, a shadow moved across the hallway. But it didn't move like a normal shadow. It moved in the shape of a person walking. Aaron stood up slowly. The hallway was empty. He walked towards the bedroom and opened the door carefully. Melissa was asleep. But as he stood there watching her, she suddenly began whispering again in her sleep. At first, the words were too quiet to understand. Then they became clearer. "I will take her," she murmured. Aaron froze. Those were the same words she had repeated the night she attacked him. Melissa's eyes suddenly opened. For a moment, she stared directly at him. Then she smiled. It was a slow, unnatural smile that didn't resemble her normal expression at all. Aaron felt the same terrifying realization he had experienced weeks earlier. Whatever had appeared beside their bed in the old apartment had not been a dream, and whatever it wanted from Melissa was far from over, because from that night onwards, the attacks, the strange occurrences only became more violent. And eventually, one night when he woke up, he saw Melissa missing. He searched throughout the apartment, but he couldn't find her anywhere. He went outside and looked on the streets, but he couldn't find any trace of her. Nothing. He got worried and looked in the entire building, then the entire neighborhood. The whole morning he just spent looking for Melissa, but there was absolutely no trace of her. It was as she had just disappeared in the thin air. In the afternoon, after completely exhausted, he went to the police station to find help, and he told the police about what had happened, and Melissa, his wife, was now missing. The police tried to figure out if Melissa had just disappeared or went away deliberately, but there was no trace. Police couldn't find anything, no clue, no evidence. It was like Melissa had never existed in real life. But Aaron didn't stop there. He continued to search for Melissa day and night for many days to come. But there was no trace, no clue. Her friends didn't hear from Melissa. Her family knew nothing about her disappearance. After 2 nights, when Aaron slept, he had once again a nightmare, as if it was happening in real life. He saw the same burnt woman standing right next to him, with a horrible, sinister laughter, as if she was making fun of him. He was horrified in the dream and he screamed at that woman. He screamed for help, but there was nobody to listen. And the only words he heard from that woman were, "I have taken her. She is mine. You will never get her back. Stop searching for her, or you'll lose whatever you have left." After saying this in a growling voice, the woman just jumped on Aaron, as he immediately woke up from the nightmare. He was breathing heavily and was full of sweat. Since that time, despite of him looking continuously and taking help from the police, To this day, there is no clue where Melissa went. To this day, neither the police nor Aaron knows anything about Melissa, and nobody had heard from her ever after. We try to bring you real occurrences from around the world, so if you're interested, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking our videos. It helps with the YouTube algorithm to improve the reach of our videos. Thanks for your support and stay tuned for more real-life horror encounters.